Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by Lunar Display and ExpressVPN. I'm John Voorhees, and with me, as always, is Federico Vitici. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John, and welcome back. You've been all over the globe lately.
I heard my travels described as 5 months of travel. You know, I do listen to your other shows, Federico, and I heard you tell Mike and Steven that I was gone for 5 months. And I guess it's nice to be missed.
You were missed. That's why.
It's nice to be missed. But I was first in San Francisco for GDC, and then I was on a family trip to Ireland to visit one of my kids who goes to school there. So, yeah, I was not of a whole lot of use to Mac Stories for a couple of weeks there. But I am back to my normal routine. So, we thought we would, since I made the good choice of making travel plans that coincided, just like they did last year, with an Apple event, which was the event held on, I think it was Monday, March 25th, if I got my dates right.
Yeah.
And, obviously that's been talked about in a lot of places already. We're not going to talk about the event itself today, but we thought we would dive in a little deeper on the apps because we have betas out now and things like the TV app and news, the changes to news are out there, and we could talk about those and a few other things. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I think we should start from the TV app because it's out now in the iOS 12.3 beta and the tvOS also 12.3 beta. We have already on Mac Stories an overview by Ryan. Ryan is our official TV app and tvOS person now. He writes about the TV app all the time. There's something new. So you can try the new TV app right now. It's out I have it on my smaller iPad Pro, which is where I installed the beta. I have the iPhone XS Max and the 12.9-inch iPad Pro are back on the stable release. So I just have the beta on the smaller Pro and on the Apple TV because I just didn't want to remove the beta profile. So it just updated on its own, whatever. Anyway, there are a couple of bigger changes in the TV app and a few smaller ones. I guess the main change is there's a new design. Apple sort of cleaned up a bunch of things all around the UI. There's a new navigation, which is you have different sections. You have a new way. You have this new menu at the top on the Apple TV. And most of all, they reorganized, like, for example, how seasons are presented for TV shows that you own. So now if you, for example, I own The Office and the complete season package, and now I can easily browse, season 1, season 2, and so forth. And it didn't used to be this simple before. I know that my friend Stephen Hackett, he complained about this many, many times on Connected. The other big change is the integration with channels. And channels is basically what Amazon has been doing for a while with Amazon Prime channels. It means that Apple is teaming up with some networks like Tastemade and Showtime and HBO.
CBS All Access, I think, is part of it too.
Yeah, and unlike the old solution, which required you to install the separate third-party app for each network, and therefore configure your account with those networks, if you wanted to jump from the thumbnails showcased in the TV app to those third-party players, now everything is integrated in the TV app. So channels means that you can watch third-party content using the native Apple video player of the TV app, which brings a bunch of advantages. First of all, the entire process is faster because you're not switching apps. You don't have to sign into third-party accounts. You don't have to download third-party apps. Everything just happens natively inside. You can subscribe with your Apple ID, and that's about it. And what is also nice is that because you got the native video player, you also get the benefits of the Apple video player for free. So picture-in-picture, supported by default. Not all third-party video players support picture-in-picture. You get to be able to download shows on iOS because that's a native feature of the Apple TV app. And you get, everything is just a bit faster in terms of you tap a thumbnail and it starts playing. And of course, on the iPad, if you use an iPad with a Bluetooth keyboard or with a smart keyboard, the video player also supports keyboard shortcuts. So you can pause and play and control playback. I think it's, I've been able to, I can use the TV app and I can use Apple News because I set my devices to the US region.
Right.
And I also have a US-based Apple ID. So it's easy for me to just sign up and test these services from Italy. And what is also nice about channels, John, is that Unlike the old system, which required me, for example, to install the Showtime apps or the HBO apps, and those apps, they did more strict checks. For example, they check my
Oh,
IP
sure.
address or
Right.
the credit card that I had on file and my zip code. Apple just doesn't care about doing all of this. So I signed up for Showtime using my US account from Italy, and I can just watch Billions, for example, which is a Showtime show from Italy, and Apple doesn't require a VPN, doesn't check my IP address. They just don't care. And that's always been the case with Apple services. As long as you have a US Apple account, they don't do any additional checks.
Have you tried the new app logged in with the Italy region? Because, one of the things about,
That I haven't.
okay, because it's supposed to go, right now, I think it's in 10 countries and it's supposed to go to 100. And I don't think it's currently in Italy, right?
I don't think it is. And Apple, of course, has only announced channels for the US, I think. So
Oh, okay.
I suppose eventually we will get proper Italian version and there will be Italian programming. Like I could see some of the major TV networks integrate with Apple on this. But yeah, I just keep my devices set to the United States so that I'm sure I can use Apple News and I can use the TV app. There are some other changes. For example, there's now a For You section that has been reorganized in the Watch Now view of the app. And For You now recommends TV shows and episodes and movies that you might like. There isn't like a voting system like in iTunes or in Apple Music. In theory, everything is based on like on-device machine learning that learns from your habits and all of that. Of course, this is a new system, and so far, for example, I like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and it recommends a bunch of other comedies, like The Good Place, for example, which, I mean, fair enough. I do like that, but I wonder just how specific it will be the more you keep using it, so it's impossible to judge right now. Ryan talked about this. I don't know if you've seen this, John. Autoplay for trailers.
Yes.
It doesn't seem to be as intrusive as Netflix. Netflix basically, like, as soon as you open a detailed view of a TV show or a movie, it starts playing the trailer. And like,
Right.
it's one of those things with Netflix, the autoplay for trailers, and also the fact that as soon as an episode ends, I think you have like a 2-second window to say, no, I don't want to watch the next one. It's like every time we're just scrambling to find the remote.
I know.
But it seems to be, I think Ryan mentioned there's like a 5-second delay in the new TV app for autoplay for trailers.
Yeah, it is better that way. The other thing about the design that's changed is that it used to be that TV shows were squares and movies were vertical rectangles, portrait mode rectangles to kind of look like a movie poster. And that's all changed. Everything now is a landscape style rectangle, which creates a lot more, there's just room for more information on the screen, which I think is a good thing, because before there were, depending on where you were in the app, there was not really a whole lot of content showing. There was a ton of white space, and while white space can be nice in some circumstances, when you're trying to find a show to watch, only having 6, 7, 8 things to look at compared to a dozen or more is kind of nice.
Yeah, it does feel more compact and cleaner and a bit easier to use. So overall, I think I'm a fan. I know that the TV app, it gets a lot of criticism because it's not the most advanced video player out there, and the old integration with third-party networks was kind of not terrible, but it was not great.
Right.
And I think this new design, coupled with channels, if Apple can extend these partnerships as much as possible, I mean, of course, they will not get Netflix to be a partner for the TV app. But if they can get, HBO and Showtime and maybe Starz and all these other smaller networks that still have tons of good programming, I think that will be really cool. And I mean, I say this as the person who still buys TV shows as iTunes episodes, because it's just easier that way. I don't have to sign up, for example, for these TV networks that are based in the US, because so far, until today, if I wanted to do that, like for example, when HBO aired season 2 of Westworld, I had to download the HBO app and create an account, and every time I wanted to stream an episode, I had to use a VPN. And I don't know if maybe with this new channel system, if it will continue to be usable from Italy, maybe I will be able to stop buying episodes and just sign up for these US networks from Italy and use my US Apple ID and iTunes credit to pay for those subscriptions. Then maybe I will consider stop buying individual seasons and episodes. But also, it is kind of nice that I own, the complete series of The Office or the complete series of Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of, every time I can just jump in and watch an episode. So we'll see how it goes. But I am one of those people who actually likes the TV app.
It'll be interesting if more of this comes into the TV app and it loosens some of those requirements that you mentioned and makes them at least consistent across different apps, because everybody's got their own system. I know, for instance, we have Hulu, and because we have Hulu Live, which your Hulu Live is different depending on what region of the United States you're in. And so, like, when my kids come home for school, they log into Hulu, because then when they go back to school, they can have it for, like, I think 2 weeks off of our IP address before it locks them out. So there's this constant, everybody logs into Hulu when they visit home, and then they go back to school and have it for a little while, and then it goes away. And that's not, I don't think, necessarily fixable with a VPN, or at least it'd be pretty complicated, because you'd have to have the same IP address kind of static in order to stay logged in. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by our awesome friends at Luna Display. They are the makers of the only hardware solution that turns your iPad into a wireless display for your Mac. That means you'll have a second display that's super portable with basically zero lag and gorgeous image quality. I have 2 Luna displays. They sent me one to test out, and I loved it so much that I bought one for myself. I've just been in the process of setting up a new Mac Mini, and it's the perfect solution. This is my main desktop computer, but I don't have to be sitting at my desk all the time because of the Luna display. I can take my iPad Pro, roam about the house, and use my Mac Mini without having to go down to my office. If I forget something, there's a file I need, whatever it is, I can just sit on the couch, sit at the kitchen table, wherever I happen to be, and access everything on my Mini just like I was sitting in front of it. Setting up an extra screen can be super fiddly, but Luna Display is super simple. Just plug in a small bit of hardware into your Mac and you're good to go. But you're a busy person and sometimes you're traveling without a Wi-Fi connection. But that's totally okay, no worries, because you can also connect via USB. It's super simple to set up and you'll love the extra screen real estate. Luna Display is a complete extension of your Mac. It supports external keyboards as well as the Apple Pencil and touch interactions. It basically turns your Mac into a touch device. And the all-new Liquid Video Engine brings significantly reduced latency and faster screen refresh rates on your iPad. Listeners of App Stories can get a 10% discount on the Luna Display. Just go to lunadisplay.com and enter the promo code AppStories at checkout. That's lunadisplay.com and the promo code AppStories at checkout. Go there now, upgrade your setup. You're going to love it. That's lunadisplay.com and the promo App Stories for 10% off. Our thanks to Luna Display for supporting App Stories.
We should talk about Apple News now. There's a new service called Apple News Plus. Lets you read over 300 magazines in Apple News in 2 formats, either the PDF format or the new Apple News format, which is like actual text that you can resize and, select and all that. This is, of course, based on the acquisition of Texture, which was a service that provided magazines as PDF documents essentially before. Apple acquired Texture last year, and now we have Apple News Plus, which is available in the US and Canada, $9.99 a month, and you get access to magazines and also some newspapers like the Wall Street Journal and the LA Times, and I think in Canada, the Toronto Star, maybe it's called.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And you will also eventually get access to digital publications, as Apple calls them, like, for example, Extra Crunch, which is the membership system that TechCrunch now has. They will offer just the articles, not the video or the podcasts, but they will offer the articles in Apple News Plus eventually. And also Vox is doing the highlight, which will be a publication in Apple News, but still not out at the moment. So I've signed up for Apple News Plus. I've talked about this on other shows, but I kind of want to hear your thoughts, John. Are you trying Apple News Plus? Have you played around with it?
I am. I started it on April 1st, or actually no, right at the end of March, right before I came back to the US, and downloaded a bunch of magazines to read on the airplane. And one of the first problems I had was that I couldn't see my magazines because I just got a spinner. And I've noticed that even when I wasn't online on the plane with my phone at the time, and I wasn't able to see them, and I don't know what the problem was. I think it's just a bug. But I've even seen this occasionally when I open the news app and I'm, connected to my home Wi-Fi. It'll spin for a little while. But I think that the most recent time that happened was because there was a new issue of the New Yorker that came in a couple of days ago, and that it was downloading because I hadn't opened up the magazine section. I like this. I mean, I like the availability of all these publications, and I could see myself staying on after the trial is over. There are a lot of things, though, about the app that I think could stand improvement. There's no way, for instance, to just search for a publication. You have to go through either a category, and you have to kind of guess which one's right because some things kind of span multiple categories, or you can go through the alphabetical, either A through M or N through Z. I don't really understand why there's not a way to search these. I also feel like the news part of this, I don't know if it's an afterthought or because Apple couldn't sign up a lot of newspapers. They just kind of, deep six these guys beneath all the magazines, because when you add a magazine, it ends up in your My Magazine section, which is right at the beginning of that part of the app. But you can't do that with like the Wall Street Journal. And they're not listed in the categories either. I mean, they will show up after the My Magazine section in what I guess are basically, featured articles, because I have a section in here for the Wall Street Journal and I can open that up. But, when you open a magazine article that's recommended, like I have one here from GQ that I opened up earlier today, and down in the lower left corner, you see a little thumbnail of the magazine cover for the current issue, and you can open up the full magazine from there and add it to your collection of magazines. But that doesn't exist with newspapers. You don't have that option.
Yeah, it's kind of strange how you do not get any easy way to open newspapers. The only trick that I've seen is like you can just open the Wall Street Journal in Safari and then use the Apple News extension in the share sheet,
Mm-hmm.
so that any article that you find can quickly reopen it from Safari in Apple News. And I've seen like some questions being asked about how exactly is the Wall Street Journal going to be limited in Apple News. And like the day of the event, there were some rumors of there will be a limited selection of articles, and you will not be able to get all the business news. But I've tried, and like every single article that I tested from Safari, I still have a standalone Wall Street Journal subscription, which I managed to cancel because I just want to use Apple News Plus. But every article that I tried with my account logged in Safari, and I opened the article in Apple News and it was available. So I think the only limitation is if you add the Wall Street Journal channel to your favorites and you go to the front page of the channel, you will get a limited selection of highlights. And maybe you will not be able to search for older articles. But if you actually open them from Safari with the extension in Apple News, so if you have a way to jump to a story directly, it will be available. So it just requires you to do a bit more research, basically, if you absolutely want to read a specific Wall Street Journal story. But really, for my use case, which consists of just sometimes I like to just see what's new on the Wall Street Journal, like read one of their feature stories,
Mm-hmm.
or most of the time in my RSS feeds, one of the Apple websites that I follow, like 9 to 5 Mac or The Verge or Mac Rumors, they link to a Wall Street Journal report, and I just need to be able to click that link and redirect the story from Safari to Apple News so that I can read the full article. The Wall Street Journal, they do rumors about the next iPhone or the next iPad or the next version of
Right.
iOS. And so my use case mostly consists of take this article that is paywalled in the Wall Street Journal in Safari, open it in Apple News, where I'm an Apple News Plus subscriber, and therefore I can read the full story.
Right.
And for that use case, it's fine.
Yeah, sometimes with the Wall Street Journal, you can find like the AMP version or something, and it has the full text if you Google the exact title. But that's not super reliable. And I do like this. I think it was reported that the archive only goes back 3 days in the app. And you're probably right, though, if you have an actual URL that you can then send over to the news app, that you can find it despite the fact that the search is limited. I mean, I think the other thing that I noticed that happened to me right away was, and I saw Jim Dalrymple tweet this at some point, the day after I signed up, I got an alert that popped up that said my subscription had expired after 24 hours. Now, I mean, I just dismissed it and everything was still there. There was no problem. But, this thing, it's very much a beta. It's got some issues. So if you try it now, there are a few rough edges here and there.
Overall, though, I would say that I like what I'm seeing now in Apple News Plus. I mean, I've been using Apple News for a while myself, like even before Apple News Plus, just to catch up on certain topics and certain publications that I do not want to follow on Twitter or that I do not want to add to my RSS subscriptions. So, for example, music news or video game news or just entertainment news and politics, for example. All those sources I keep in Apple News because it's nice that I can go to the For You page and eventually maybe the system will learn that I do not want to read about your government as much, but
right.
It's a nice way to get an overview of what's going on. And now with Apple News Plus, I get to read, in addition to the Wall Street Journal, I get to read Edge Magazine and Retro Gamer, which are two excellent video game magazines. And I got Vanity Fair and I got Rolling Stone. If I could just mention one complaint is the PDF versions of those magazines. They look beautiful on the iPad. For example, if you open Edge, which is a PDF format magazine on the iPad Pro, it looks fantastic. You get the beautiful typography and the custom layouts and the full page spread. It looks really, really nice. But on the iPhone, those PDFs, because they are static documents, they can be hard to read because you need to pinch in and out to zoom and get closer to text. And of course, text cannot be resized because that's not how PDF documents work. On the other hand, the Apple News format magazines, they are easier to read because you can resize text and you can tap on images to view them in full screen, and they support media. So they can add rich text elements and, visual galleries and all those types of widgets. The problem is not all of them do. In fact, most of the Apple News format magazines are based on the same template that literally looks the same across dozens and dozens of magazines.
Yes.
They all have the same table of contents and the same structure. They just change the colors and maybe the logo. And that table of contents is basically useless because it doesn't show you page numbers, because it doesn't show you sections. It doesn't tell you what an article is about. It just gives you the title. And my interpretation is that these big publishers, they all converted to this same tool that lets them generate the Apple News format code necessary.
Sure.
But this engine that they're using to generate the Apple News format could use a little more flexibility because right now it's very bare bones.
Yeah, it's very, very basic because it just feels like all they're doing is ripping the title out of the HTML, applying some color code for their table of contents, and then, having the body flow from there. It's not great. And I kind of wonder whether I guess it'll depend how successful news is and the magazines are with News Plus, to see whether other companies will follow suit and add some of these. I wanted to ask you one other question is, at the end of my magazine section, not the expanded version, but if you swipe over to the right, I have a suggested magazine. How do I get rid of that?
I have no idea.
It's one of those things. It's like, it's been the same one since day one. It's National Geographic, which is fine. I mean, I'm not really that interested.
If you long tap, there's no menu, right?
Right.
That tells you I'm not interested in this.
That's right. And it's just called suggested. And as far as I can tell, there are no other suggested magazines anywhere in the UI. Like, I can't go to a suggested list. Maybe the featured below is essentially suggested because it's maybe based on what I have already subscribed to, but I don't really, the suggested thing is a little strange to me. The other thing I'd like to be able to do is just hide publications, because there are some I'm never going to read them, and I don't want them to pop up as suggested or necessarily even in the featured stuff down below.
Yeah, I think I was looking for a similar menu a few days ago because you can sort of train the system in the For You page of traditional or standard Apple News, but it feels like Apple News Plus does not let you say remove this or this. I don't want to see this anymore because it's very much focused on giving you access to all of this amazing content that they have.
Right.
All these magazines about do it yourself things,
Yes.
or biking or hunting, all these men's health magazines. And like, I would like a system that just lets me say, just show me these 5 or 6 magazines on the front page. And if I want, I will go look for the archives or whatever.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by ExpressVPN. We can probably all hold up our hands and admit it. Cybercrime is something that we think happens to other people because who would want your data, right? The bad news is that stealing data from people like you and me using public Wi-Fi is one of the simplest ways for hackers to make money. If you leave your internet connection unencrypted, your passwords and credit card numbers are vulnerable. But there's something you can do to protect yourself from cyber criminals. Start using ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN works by anonymizing your internet browsing. It encrypts your data and hides your public IP address with easy-to-use apps that run seamlessly in the background on your device. You can turn ExpressVPN protection on with just one click. Then you're free to safely surf public Wi-Fi without being snooped on or having your personal data stolen. ExpressVPN is rated the #1 VPN service by TechRadar. It even comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. I've been traveling a lot lately, and ExpressVPN has been fantastic. I've been on all sorts of Wi-Fi networks that I'm not familiar with, at Airbnbs and coffee shops and airports all over the place. And the thing about ExpressVPN is I set it up weeks ago, and I don't have to think about it anymore because it works so seamlessly in the background that it just works whenever I'm on an untrusted network without me having to intervene, turn it on, mess around with settings, or anything like that. It's a great way to give you peace of mind. For less than $7 a month, you can get the same ExpressVPN protection that I've got. If you ever use public Wi-Fi and want to keep the bad guys away from your data, you need ExpressVPN. So go to expressvpn.com/appstories to learn more. Protect your online activity today and find out how you can get 3 months free at expressvpn.com/appstories. That's expressvpn.com/appstories for 3 months free with a 1-year package. Our thanks to ExpressVPN for their support of App Stories.
We should talk, even though we don't have an app, but we saw and we know some of the details, we should talk about Apple Arcade, which is the new service that will allow you to play App Store originals, maybe exclusive games, sort of commissioned by Apple, but really curated by Apple. Exclusive games that on iOS will only be available on Apple Arcade. You will not be able to buy them from the App Store. They will be on other platforms. They can be on PC, they can be on Nintendo Switch or PlayStation. I suppose they will not be on Android, so the mobile version will be exclusive to Apple Arcade. And Apple Arcade will be a section of the App Store, Apple showed in screenshots, where once you signed up, and we do not have pricing yet, so no details on how much it'll cost, you will be able to just jump in and download any of the games included. Apple hopes to launch the service with over 100 games. They have a webpage that lists some of those titles, from Where Cards Fall, published by Snowman. We mentioned this game before. We may or may not have seen an early version in action, John, in person. There's an RPG game by Mistwalker, which is the company from the creator of Final Fantasy.
Right.
There's Sonic Racing. There's a really tons of great indie titles that Apple is sort of helping get onto this subscription service. What do you think?
I am really excited about it. I think it's a great idea. I mean, from my perspective, it feels like we talked about this a little bit. You and I were guests on the Tech Meme Ride Home podcast not long ago, and we talked a little bit about this, but it feels to me like, the games universe has been so dominated by free to play and kind of cookie cutter and copycat type games that a lot of these bigger budget, more, I guess, risky, artistic and indie games were kind of getting choked out. I mean, there are just so many games, so many people who don't want to pay anything for a game that they really had a hard time next to all the free-to-play stuff. And so it should be said that the reason the App Store is like that is because of the way the App Store is set up by Apple. So, I mean, they really have no one to blame for that except themselves. But instead of kind of changing the way pricing or subscriptions or whatever works to try to tip the balance maybe more in favor of some of these games, instead, Apple has carved out this service to have these games be exclusively there. And it's kind of a way, it's like a new home for this sort of game. And I'll put the free-to-play stuff to the side. I'm not really a big fan of that stuff. But I'm just glad that I'll have a place where I can go find 100 games, download them as I want. And because they're downloadable, they're playable offline too, which I think is a big bonus as compared to some of the streaming services that we've seen announced recently.
Yeah. I'm very excited about Apple Arcade. I hope that we can learn more at WWDC, both from Apple and behind the scenes from developers as we talk to them in private. Yeah, I think this has a chance to really rethink the expectations of people from, the kind of games that you can find on the App Store. I think it's also very early to judge the merits or success or failures of this service because it isn't out yet. And we haven't seen the games, and ultimately the proof is in the games. And the proof is in the tastes that Apple has and sort of the direction that they set for the kind of experiences that you will be able to get on Apple Arcade. Now, before we wrap up, John, you have to explain to me why people are so in love with the Apple Card. That was also one of the services announced that will be integrated in the Wallet app on your iPhone.
Oh, well, see, I thought you were going to have me explain why Americans are so into the Apple Card.
Well, yes, Americans. Yes, Americans. Americans have a thing with credit cards. I think they have a strange relationship with credit cards that we do not have in Europe. I think there's like a cultural divide between our relationships with credit cards.
I think that is absolutely true. And I think maybe part of it is driven by how bad contactless is here, than how long it's taken for things like Apple Pay to even become a thing here. And even now, we have all the terminals now, but they don't work nearly as seamlessly or well as they do in Europe and the UK and other places. So, yeah, I mean, that's as a result, I think credit cards play a much bigger role in the United States. And I mean, I don't know, there are a couple of things that appeal to me in particular, and one is the security, because unlike, again, in Europe, when you go to a restaurant and you pay a bill with a credit card, they take it away and they go to the back room.
Which is just insane. It's just insane.
It really is insane in this day and age, because what there's at any point, they can just someone could just copy down all the information on your card and then use it, and that happens to people all the time. But with this card, at least, there's nothing on it. I mean, your name's on it, I guess, but there's no numbers on it. And that's all, you get one-use PINs and credit card numbers that are used for each transaction. So even if someone was able to skim that number off somehow with a magnetic reader or whatever, it's of limited utility. That, to me, is a big advantage of the card. There are other credit cards available that have similar technology built into them, but most that I've seen still have some sort of number on them at some point. So I think that's good. There's also the spending tracking that I guess is going to be built into the Wallet app. I'm not as excited about that because most people don't send all of their finances through a credit card. So, you probably have a bank account with a debit card, and maybe you have 2 credit cards or 3 or whatever it is. And so having data about your spending patterns just in the Wallet app for one card isn't really going to give you a complete picture of your finances, but at least for that one card, it'll give you an idea whether you're kind of going crazy in a particular month and that sort of thing. And it'll remind you when the bill is due. The third prong of it is that there are really clear benefits in terms of the perks. You get cash back, and it's done daily. It's not done like monthly or quarterly or whatever, like some other cards do. The percentage back of cash is competitive, but it's not the best among credit cards that you can get in the US. So I think I'll probably get one myself, especially for Apple purchases, because it gives 3% back on that, which is pretty good. But, it's not going to be something that I use constantly. I'll probably use it though at restaurants because it'll be safer in that context. So, it sounds good to me, but I'm not overwhelmingly excited about it.
Yeah, I can see why. Honestly, I think I would sign up for an Apple Card in Italy if it was available. But also, I know this is one of those things that it will come out probably. We're now in 2019, so I'm gonna say 2021 or 2022. Still plenty of time for me to wait and be
Right.
jealous of you guys with the Apple Card. So yeah, I can see why. The security aspect. I think that's very compelling. So we will follow up on all of these apps that we covered today. I mean, the TV app we'll cover again when it launches publicly, and then Apple News Plus we're using now, and maybe we'll have an article. We'll check in on this every few months, see how it's going. But then for Apple Arcade and the Apple Card, I guess we're just gonna have to wait until this summer or this fall, whenever it is that they actually become available.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting year. I mean, I think this is kind of the services side of things, and I'm sure we'll see a lot more at WWC that we'll be talking about all throughout the summer. All right, Federico, I think that's probably a good place to stop for this week. I want to thank our sponsors again. That was Luna Display and ExpressVPN for making the show possible. And you can find me and Federico. We're over at MacStories.net, and both of us are on both Twitter and Instagram, where we have the exact same handles. Federico is at Viticci, that's Viticci, and I'm at John Voorhees, JohnVoorhees. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.